What's going on, folks? Welcome back to another episode of Reformation TV. We hope that you enjoyed the last one. Oh, let me do some magic real quick. I don't even know why I forgot this, but you guys are getting ready to see some magic. Hold on. Boom. There you go. See, it's magic, right? It's just like magic. I'm you got to stop with the hand movements. You get me? See, when I come on here and I try to be serious and reverent and all that other good stuff, there's temptation is always at the door.
Oh, stop! You're only tempted when you're drawn away by your own lust.
Touche. I'm Dan PD Thomas, and I'm with the one and only
BT3, Dr. BT3. What's up, everybody?
All right, so okay, this is an inside thing before we get into today's show. But are you going to do a show on Christmas or about Christmas? We'll tell y'all about this later. You got to do one, just one. No, we won't make you do it.
You know, I
know right now you guys are wondering, what is the thing about Christmas? You will find out when the Lord comes back, when he cracks the sky. Maybe then. We'll tell you. Email us about it, right? Maybe email us about it.
There you go.
And then we'll go from there. So today we're going to tackle some stuff. We do live in a world. Things go on. And we know everything is not necessarily about the church, but I think the church affects the world and the world affects the church. And there are just things going on and transpiring that need the attention of the subculture, which is the church. And if we get things right in the subculture when they have problems that they cannot solve in the huge culture, then maybe we can start having some influence again. And so this week, we're going back to when Laura Ingraham, you might remember this, when she told from Fox News, she told LeBron when it came to political issues or social issues, she said, just shut up and dribble. And if you notice, there's been some sort of a muzzle that's been placed on the pulpit as well. And we feel that sometimes we're being told to just shut up and preach. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So you've seen this controversy. Is that the right word? Is it a controversy?
Probably.
Okay. So you've seen the controversy concerning, and this is a mix between sports and social issues with Kyrie Irving and the video that he purportedly, or book that he purportedly, when he posted it, and now we're having an argument. If you post it, is a promotion, or is it just, hey, look at this. This is something, we don't know anymore, right? We don't know anymore. And how that's affected a community of faith. Is he anti-Semitic? And let me start it here. I don't know in my lifetime if I've ever been so anti-everything as I am now. Like if I go to a restaurant and they say, hey, do you want the potatoes that come with this breakfast meal? No. Oh, you're anti-potatoes, huh? You don't like potatoes? Just because I say I don't like something or I disagree with something, I'm now anti. Or if I suggest someone to watch something and then it has elements of something in it that are against another group, somehow that represents my idea and my true feeling about those people. And I'm just a little worried about the direction in which these things are going, man.
Well, I mean, it's just we're in a weird place, I think, as a society, because of maybe the advent of technology and social media. And here's what I mean by that. People for decades, centuries even, have had diverging thoughts, opinions, ideas, concepts, differences. But now with social media, I mean, they canceled Kevin Hart a few years ago for a joke he posted like 10 years prior to that, on Twitter. And so I think it's just a weird space that we're in, trying to navigate between cancel culture and common sense culture, cancel culture and conversation culture. And I think that's kind of where we are. Like, to your point about, I don't want to have potatoes with my breakfast meal. Oh, what's wrong with tubers? What's wrong with potatoes? You have something against, and it's like, I just don't want the starch in my diet this morning. But we've become such a sensitive society, and everybody has a voice and a platform that can go viral in any second, any moment. It makes us a little bit gun shy, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point that you make about sensitivity, because maybe at one point, and let's just focus on America, maybe at one point people were too insensitive to how something was to someone else or how that made someone feel. And because of that person's perceived status in society, it didn't matter how you felt because you were inferior and were
Right.
not a part of the superior group. But I think that what we have a tendency to do is we have a tendency to go to the extreme.
Absolutely.
I think we've went to the extreme in the feminist movement, because there was a time when women were in every part of society were not equal to men. And in many ways, they're still not. That's not good. And so we can keep doing that. But I think it took away sometimes from who people were as women, just in terms of their natural identity. Now, this doesn't mean, I don't want anyone going away from here thinking that I'm saying as a woman, you should act a certain way. But there's a certain nurturing characteristic that women have that men just don't normally have, that are born with. And so as a consequence, it took away from that because it went to the extreme. We go to extremes. Our political structure is at an extreme right now. There's no one who's a moderate.
Yeah.
Which means that you don't have your best ideas coming to the table. And even if those best ideas don't agree, they always agree on what's best for the country, what's best for both sides. You used to have that. Now, what you have is, if I'm on the right and you're on the left, hey, you're demonic. You're no good for this country. There's nothing good about you. It's constant criticism, to the point to where people actually hate people they don't even know.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's just, it's sad. And again, I got to circle back around. It's because of social media. Because if one person is bold enough to, and I'm not, and let me just say this before I say that, social media is neutral.
Yes.
It's not bad. It's not great. It's not horrible. It's just, it is what it is. Right. But you have one person that is bold enough to put their ideas out there in the ether,
Right.
and then the right people say, hey, I agree with that. Then they share it, and then they give their version of what has already been shared, and then somebody else goes, hey, that makes sense. And then you put a political tag on it, and or you put a financial booster behind it, or you attach an agenda behind it. You start a movement. And that's just what it is. And again, and it's not that people just all of a sudden started having differing opinions. It's just that we have access to it 24 hours a day. I was a little boy. I remember my grandparents had cable, and we did not have cable at our house. And so I was always amazed, in the late 80s, early 90s. I'm like, oh, look at all these channels. I'm like, oh my God,
Yeah.
But but that 24-hour news cycle, and a channel for this and a channel for that, and a news cycle, a news channel for this particular ideology, and a news channel for that particular idea, and it's just just a big pot and a smorgasbord of whatever you want, whatever your flavor is, it is available.
Yeah, and you talk about that 24-hour news cycle. Like, whenever I go visit my in-laws in California, they watch the news a lot. And it's either soap operas or the news or westerns. That's kind of what they do. and as they're watching the news, I'm coming in and out of my room there, and I'm like, didn't they just say this? It's the same thing over and over and over. Now, on a
Yeah.
personal level, I can't take that. You,
Yeah.
you have to say something different. I have to have some sort of variety. But what that tells me is that you are intentionally bombarding me
With the same information.
with the same information to manipulate my perspective.
Subconsciously, it'll get in your heart. It'll get
Yep.
into your psyche. It'll get into your mind 100%.
And so
Yeah.
that's just one of those things that, I'm like, okay, now we're getting to that space. Now, one of the things when you bring up social media, the other thing I think about is we've never had this much access to information before either. So I think the other thing that's going on is that whether we know it or not, we're having trouble processing that much data at one time
Yes.
to where you become susceptible to what is the biggest and the most seen thing. So if you're hearing the same thing all the time and you're hearing it at this huge amount, then eventually maybe your subconscious will just give up. It'll yield.
Yeah.
It'll yield because it can't process that all at one time. Because when you first heard something, there's a natural maturation process where your body needs to look at the information, assess it, know where to file it, all those different things, where that time is being rushed or it's been taken away. So you don't even have time to evaluate the information. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was going to say, what we do, what we have now is a variety of echo chambers
Mm-hmm.
where, an environment where all I hear is what I believe, what I want to hear, to the exclusion of opposing views and opposing opinions. And so it gets reinforced, like you said, subconsciously, where it just becomes background noise, but I'm hearing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And my soul and my spirit are picking up this information, and it just kind of oozes out of my subconscious. And I don't know why I voted the way I did. I don't know why I think the way that I do. I don't, anybody who disagrees with me is is just not thinking, and just, it's just wrong, and I think that's a bad thing, that in some ways, even when I look at the scriptures, I think the men of God spoke to a larger society and not just to the pulpit, or to the pews rather.
Yeah, even when we show up in the Gospels, you got John the Baptist,
Yes.
speaking to Herod, and it just wasn't just not that Jewish community. And from what I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, there has always been a voice of God has always used a proclamator, male, female, to be a voice of reason, to be a voice of clarity, to be a voice of truth to all people, so that when society as a whole started to go awry or were in danger of not only abdicating their responsibility, but even their destiny, God would use a voice to help with that. And it just seems to me that not only have we been muted, not only have we been muzzled, it's almost to the point we're being ignored, and people are just saying, hey, shut up and preach. Stay with the religious things, leave the political, the social things to those of us who know about it. But even as we're talking now, I hope, because we didn't start out with any scriptures, we didn't break open the Bible when we first started this. I hope you can see by now that there's more wisdom. We all live in a world in us than just when we're breaking down scriptures for those who believe what we believe, which is necessary. But we have thoughts about the world that could help, and I think sometimes are even more centered, which is something that we don't have. But I have a question, for us today. What happened to the voice of clarity and reason as it relates to the church, to the point where even if we say something that could help, it's not having any impact?
Very good observation. You said something, and it triggered a word in me, and that word is dualism.
Yeah.
That we have gotten in a society where it's sacred space, secular space. I'm sure you've heard this. Thanksgiving is next week. And what do? You don't talk about politics. You don't talk about religion. You know, you don't talk about, you know, finances, you know, with family members and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Because again, we kind of live in this dualistic society where it's like, okay, you're the preacher, that's the president. And we don't seemingly have the nuance to see the interconnectivity. I'm a human being.
First.
I am a human being. I am a man. I'm an African American man. You know, so I mean, so no one person is one dimensional. So this trying to live in this dualistic society becomes difficult when your primary gifting or your primary call or your primary occupation might be in this space, but that doesn't mean that because it's in this space doesn't impact this space, or because you're over here doesn't mean it doesn't impact that which is over here. And I think our humanity should allow for us to be humans and have feelings and have thoughts and have perspectives and have whatever, you know. And like I said earlier, social media has afforded us that privilege, and it's not a bad thing. But I think because the people behind the phones, the computers, the laptops, perhaps are not nuanced themselves, or because they grew up in a dualistic society, they don't seem to understand that you're living in a world of people who don't always think like you.
Wow. So that begs another question. Is there any true unity without diversity?
Wow.
Because I think what we like in the space that we're in now is uniformity.
Yes.
And when I think about uniformity, I have a comical analogy for this. So uniformity would be, to me, when it was Men's Day or Women's Day at church, and we all wore the same thing, but we were not one in heart and mind.
Mm-hmm.
We just decided to wear that. So we're going to look uniform, but that's boring. That's not who God is. And respecting someone else's ideas and their expressions and their thoughts is good for you. I mean, it's really good. For instance, I'm watching, Raphael Warnock in Georgia, and he's a Democrat, but he's also a pastor, and he served these last 2 years in the United States Senate. And I saw on the debate stage his faith being weaponized against him. So they started looking at the programs that he was doing and start trying to find inconsistencies. And I think this speaks to the dualism that you were speaking about, because we literally compartmentalized our lives and don't see the interconnectedness and interwovenness in what we do, and that you can't separate the two. And when you do separate the two, it's dangerous, because you lose a little bit of your identity when you try to separate yourself, and you are composed not only physically and biologically, but physiologically, you're composed of body, soul, and spirit, and you try to separate those in your everyday living. Well, what is it going to cause? Chaos.
Absolutely.
Not just within, but also without. And so when I look at that and I saw what was going on, I'm saying, no, this is one man who happens to be a pastor, and he cares deeply about his faith community, but also cares about the things that are happening in his community, period. And this is not Democrat or Republican talk. He cares about the community, period. And there are things that need to be done in the natural that can be helped by the Spirit, but can't necessarily be done by the Spirit. And so now he's moved into another space with his knowledge and his wisdom, having to manage people, because that's what pastoring is. Just want to go ahead and put that out there. I know some of y'all think that pastoring is preaching. It's not. It's managing people. So if you're just wanting more opportunities to preach every Sunday, because that's what you think pastoring is, you need to remain itinerant. I'm just telling you now, because that's not what pastoring is, managing people. And so then he felt a even larger call to his community, but you can see how people are weaponizing his pastorate against him, and even trying to say he's not qualified. And we're just in this space. I mean, my God, far be it from you or I that someone has a different idea than me.
Yeah, I mean, and let's just be 100% honest. there's a racial component to that as well.
I was kind of trying to avoid that a little bit,
Let's just be honest. I mean, think about Billy Graham. Traveled the world, met with heads of state, presidents. I mean, presidents always every year have prayer breakfasts.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying you got to be consistent. So why can a man of faith come into these political spaces and arenas and speak to presidents and speak to heads of state, but when a man of the cloth says, well, I want to position myself in a political position because, like you said, I'm a man, I'm concerned about my community, I'm serving, I'm managing people, and here's the other thing people don't consider. And my grandmother told me this years ago, when I was very, very young in ministry. She said something along the lines of a pastor has to be knowledgeable about everything.
Yes.
Not an expert in everything, but knowledgeable about everything, because you're going to have people that are coming to you saying, Pastor, I'm thinking about selling my house and doing this or that with the money. What should I do? Or Pastor, I'm looking to retire. I don't know what I should, look into, or da 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 da. And people are looking to leaders, particularly pastors. And I'm just going to be 100% honest.
Okay.
And some of the things that they need answers to are not what we would consider traditional spiritual stuff. So you'll see a lot of pastors get involved and speak to the problems and the plight of the people that they lead. And some of those plights and problems don't have anything necessarily or directly to do with more Bible reading or the devil or whatever. It could be something that they're dealing with in their city that is a political ramification for those that they lead.
And it's a reservoir of wisdom that can be applied to anything.
Right.
For me, because in the same token, if you told me to just shut up and preach, when those people start encountering the problems that you just mentioned, those examples you gave, and I said nothing about it, then you're going to accuse me of saying nothing about it.
Right.
Then you're going to take my belief system, my faith, and you're going to say, because of the principles in your faith, you should be speaking to this. And sometimes it seems like a catch-22. Now, I want to make this clear. Earlier, I wasn't saying I didn't want to get into the racial component because I'm afraid of it. It's just that people don't know how to hear it. And if you haven't experienced it, if you haven't been on the brunt side of it, you don't understand it. You may think I'm pulling the race card. But I remember a gentleman asked me, and it was a genuine question, and he was a white gentleman, and he says, listen, he said, Dan, I've known you for a long time. I just got to ask a question. Aren't you tired of talking about racism? And I said, no, I'm tired of experiencing it. Hello.
What an insensitive question.
Right. And I knew he meant well because, and this is just a thing, this is a good segment for this right now. It's hard for you to have empathy for something that even in a world where we've all had to live around each other, it's just never touched you. I remember the Christian Council Center that I was doing some contract work for before I moved to Texas. The president and I, we did a Facebook Live, and on that live, he grew up in Iowa. He remembered that he never saw a black person until he was 13 years old.
Wow.
And I told him that is probably the best example of white privilege that I've ever heard. I said, because there's no way living in this world that I could go that long without seeing you. But because of your privilege, you could have gone that long and even longer without seeing me. I said, because everything I've ever had to get, an apartment, shoes, clothes, bank account, doesn't matter what it is, I've had to go through someone that looks like you because the balance of power is so lopsided. You would never have to encounter me.
Yeah.
I said, even when I enter rooms and I'm the only black dude, the pressure in that room to perform well so that someone else behind me can come and be in a room like this so it won't slam the door because I underperform. The pressure is real.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm trying to make sure I don't come off too black. Same thing about shut up and preach. Oh, he's one of those preachers. And the Lord told me, you know, because look at how church services are portrayed in movies.
Now, see, now you triggered me. No, like that. If my wife were here, she'd tell you, because we watch TV, and there's a movie that she loves that will remain nameless that has a very excitable church scene, and it drives me crazy because I hate church reenactments because it's always the comedians, David Allen Greer.
Yep.
And I like David Allen Greer,
right.
Funny guy, whatever, nothing against him personally, but it's just, it's always comedic. It's always over the board. It's, and that is the representation of Black church, whatever that means. But maybe we talk about that, whatever that means. But, and so there's already a stereotype that comes with saying to people in public, hey, I'm a pastor. Oh, you have a towel? Like, I remember one of my co-workers asked me, about that. Oh, Pastor Benjamin, you need a towel. And I'm like, okay. But the point that I'm making is, and I think what I hear you saying as well is our faith, or the stereotypical view of a pastor or a preacher is we cannot address those things because it might be considered inflammatory, anti-Christian, anti-godly, that which does not make for peace, and it's ridiculous.
And not only that, I can't make a comment because it's outside of my intellectual capacity.
Mm-hmm.
That I can only be a specialist in one thing.
Right.
And that's not true, because what we're often dealing with as pastors is the underbelly of society.
Right.
The thing that you have statistics and analytics and data about, I'm actually seeing with my eyes.
Right.
And so from an experiential standpoint, I actually have more knowledge than you. Most of yours is theories. You're not even dealing with it. So someone who has boots on the ground, you would need to come and talk to me. But we talked about this offline earlier, that when things like this happen, what's going on with Ye, what's going on with Kyrie, and other situations that come up, you are seeing that not many preachers are saying anything. And one of the foremost reasons why when we talked about this offline was that for the fear of being canceled. Because it's a real thing. Now, of course, you and I both agree that cancel culture is what needs to be canceled. 100%. And again, I'm not going to name it, but it's two groups that are driving this. Anyone can see with any, and I'll just go ahead and say this. It doesn't take long. Ray Charles can see this, and Stevie don't have to wonder. That
look, you must be a dad. That's such a dad statement,
right? And I got it from an old preacher, but anyway,
I didn't want to say you're an old dad, but
yeah. But here's the deal. Okay, if you had a problem with this man posting that, whatever, that's fine. We'll give you that. Why don't you have a problem with it still on the platform? Why are you not calling Jeff Bezos and his team? Because if we're going to start talking morality, if we're going to start talking about you being irreverent toward the group, don't just attack the user. This is it's the same thing I think about when they put people in jail for drug use. It makes no sense to me. Those people need help. You need to be focusing on the drug pusher. And the truth of the matter is, there's more drug users that go to jail than drug sellers. That's backwards. That means that there's something going on, just like we tell police that they need more training, better training for neighborhoods that they don't even live in. Why you have people policing neighborhoods they don't know anything about is is beyond me. But in the same way, you need to be dealing with the platform and what they're not doing. There's some system that they don't have that can't monitor what's put on their platform. And that's where your focus needs to be. But we also know that that's too big of a fish. They're not going to do that. They're going to vilify the low-hanging fruit and make an example out of him. I'm not even trying to get into the weeds of the situation concerning what Kyrie believes and any of that stuff, because that's going to change next year.
So you mean next week?
Yeah, next week. So and he's searching. That's fine. I got him. I'm not tripping. Whatever. But it just seems that this keeps coming back to, and as you mentioned earlier, there's a racial component to it. It keeps coming back to our community in a negative way, because there are some preachers who are not of African descent who do have voice. And it's because of that caricature that you mentioned a minute ago in those movies, that there's a certain perception, that there's a perception of a lack of intellectuality, and none of it's true.
Right.
Just none of it's true. And I'm not going to shut up and preach, because I think that preaching extends beyond the people who sit in our congregations. Our government needs to hear the message, a message. Our local municipalities need to hear a message. The way these cities are run, you need something else other than what you're hearing.
See, here's the thing, and I hope I don't get too much hate mail for this. I want to talk about this Kyrie thing.
Go ahead.
I had posted a long post maybe a week or two ago.
You sure did. Yep.
About this, and I mean, you and I know, we have a lot of conversations in private about the NBA and basketball and stuff like that. So, I've been following the NBA for many years. I'm a basketball guy, and so prior to Kyrie posting the link on his Twitter, Kyrie had a reputation of being flighty, weird. I think the word is mercurial. I think that's the word I used, which is, up and down, moody, that kind of a thing. And a lot of what he said or suggested is truth. A lot of people don't know this. My father used to take my brother and I to a Sunday evening African study group. And there were a lot of what we call now inhoteps in there. In fact, there was one that actually it was in there. That was his name. But I remember as a little boy sitting in these classes, hearing these conversations, having discussions with my dad about African history, about those sorts of things. And so for me, and I know this isn't widespread, I already had, from a little boy, I already had a semblance of awareness of our African roots, right? Like I started to get exposed to that early at a young age. And so a lot of what Kyrie was suggesting and saying about the African Hebrews, there's a tribe, I can't remember the country in Africa, called the Lemba people, Lemba, where they have literally traced their DNA to the Hebrews, and they've got Hebraic, biblical, blah 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 blah. All I'm saying is there's a lot of truth to what he said. Kyrie's problem, is a communication problem. It's a pride problem. So if we can go back in time in our little time capsule, and when Nick Friedel says, Kyrie, we saw in the press conference, we saw you posted a link, and it has, this, that, and the other saying about Hebrew people. Do you hate people? No, I don't hate people. Da, 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 da. Well, it has some anti-Semitic things in there. Are you anti-Semitic? Now the second conference. How can I be anti-Semitic? I know where I came from.
Yeah.
Just say no. Just say no. I'm not anti-Semitic. Just say, I'm sorry. I posted a video that had Hitler glorified on it. That's my bad. I was just trying to search for some things. I know people follow me and they watch what I post, and I was just putting out some information, but I didn't see that part, and I apologize. My bad. I'm not anti-Semitic. I love everybody. I'm just searching. If he just would have said that,
true,
they would have beat the Lakers the other day.
Probably because he would have been playing.
Because he would have been playing.
So can we say this? That I don't think that in those worlds, not just only the sports world, entertainment too, I don't think that they understand the power of their pulpit either.
Yeah.
Because they have a pulpit. It would have been easy to say, like, he's not. Now, if you study maps are interesting to me. If you look at the Red Sea, I think it's the Red Sea. You go back to an old map, it's the sea that divides the eastern part of Africa. This map didn't have a legend, so I don't know the miles. The eastern part of Africa from before you start getting into the Middle East, Iraq and Iran. If you look at older maps, that divide, because the earth has changed over time, is smaller.
Mm-hmm.
You could just hop over from the Middle East to the east side of Africa. So, like if you look on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, at least brother. 8 of the places that are named, I think I counted 8, are African countries.
See,
like this is all the same region.
Not only that, PD, I know this is going to be, and I don't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. I don't have a problem with it. Yeah,
Africa is a continent. It's not a country.
Yeah.
And the United States of America geographically can fit inside the continent of Africa, I think 3 times.
Yep. It's 3 times. Yep.
So let's kind of go back to the whole map that you mentioned earlier in the legend. And I hate to sound like that guy, but let's just keep it a buck. Like, our maps, most of them are not even completely representative of the truth. Africa's almost the same size on a lot of maps, or maybe just a little bit bigger, than the United States of America, which puts you in a subconscious frame of mind like, oh, this place isn't even that big. So in his defense, right, there's a lot of mainstream untruths and things that we have been conditioned to think and to believe. To your point,
yes,
the Africans were traveling to South America. Where do you think the Aztec pyramids and all of these things come from? They were traveling around, like, to your point about the smallness of the Red Sea. These people traveled around the world. These people, that's why there's similarities in culture. That's why there's, we can't even get into it.
Yeah,
but
that's a whole nother episode. But
that's a whole nother episode. But to your point, there's cross-pollinization is what you were alluding to.
Mm-hmm.
That, of course, I'm going to travel across the sea, and you speak a language, I speak a language.
Like Semitic people, Arab peoples, and African people are neighbors. So this demarcation, like this hard lines of demarcation, it's just false.
It's just false.
It's false. And we've got to, even when we go back to just in terms of melanin, when we talk about climate, the only people who were suffering profusely during that time because of the climate were Romans. Because you got to go north to get to Rome, to Italy. It's called, like, people need to understand maps. These places were dominated by melanated people.
And oh God. And just to add a little bit of Christianity to this, 2 years ago, I took a course for Harvard X, and it was entitled Christianity Through Its Scriptures.
Hmm.
And this will take us a whole nother direction, but I just got to just say
Come on.
this.
Come on.
It was amazing to me to learn of the spread of Christianity all throughout the world. All throughout the world. There's such thing called Thomas Christianity, which is a brand of Christianity in, I believe, India.
Okay.
There's different types of canons and Bibles and interpretations, and I mean, it's just it'll blow your mind. And we, like I said, we'll take it to a whole nother direction, but it'll blow your mind. The point that I'm making is this: why do we feel like there isn't a spreading of culture and people that happens all over the world? Even the Bible talks about the Jews were spread about the diaspora. Like, come on, people. Like, let's just let my people think. Like, come on. And we've got to be mature enough to have these conversations without it becoming inflammatory.
Right.
Or let me say it like this, without it being received as inflammatory.
And why is it okay? So we have to deal with this too. Why is it offensive to you to know this? What are you afraid of? So this is what we're speaking about when we talk about just shut up and preach.
Yes.
This information is no. Don't deal with history. Don't deal with culture. Don't deal with the social milieu of something in the past that has no consequence now. Just preach the Bible. And I hear this all the time. I spent 9 years in the Southern Baptist Church in California. It was a black Southern Baptist church, but we went to all the conferences and different things. And there was constantly this thing where they said, hey, let's just preach the gospel. Let's forget it about all that other stuff. No. But you don't understand the gospel that you're preaching. You wouldn't even have.
Come on, man.
If somebody that looked like me didn't give it to you. You know, when you might have said this. I remember when I was in Africa teaching, taught 100 pastors every day. Can't wait till I go back. And we were telling them that, okay, 2 of the rivers that were the 4 rivers that went out from the Garden of Eden still have their place of origin in Africa. And I was telling them this began with you. We know from history that the term Africa came from a European settler named Africanus.
Right.
The entire continent was called Ethiopia. So when we see Philip dealing with the Ethiopian eunuch, this is for the continent, not just the country. We're talking big things. How the gospel got there to the continent well before it was established in Europe. This is history, biblical history right there.
It's just it's just history. That's it.
That's it.
We don't attach an agenda to it. Don't attach a title to it. Don't attach a person or a label. It's just history.
That would be like you getting mad that somebody went to college a couple of years before you and some big stuff happened there, but now you're trying to act like you were there. You wasn't there. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? Let's be honest with you. Waterways, irrigation, refrigeration, how to get rid of waste. You can attach much of that to North Africa and Egypt. Let's get even more real. Athanasius, North African. Tertullian, North African.
Science.
Origin. All the major fathers of the faith, the things that they purported that helped build the Nicene Creed, those men were black. All of your major church fathers, how we found out about this part that's foundational to the faith, the virgin birth, immaculate conception. It's history. Those concepts were downloaded into the brains and the minds and the spirits of people who were black.
Yes.
It's just history.
It's just history.
We're not trying to make a big deal out of it and use it to get some superiority over to you. We're just saying, let's get history right.
I think let me be careful how I say this. The scripture says, and truth shall make you free.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because of two things, the narrative of the angry black man and the like kind of like you said, when your friend said, aren't you tired of talking about racism?
Yeah.
I think it's the narrative of, aren't you tired of talking about racism? And I don't want to be viewed as the angry black guy. That we just, hey, God bless you. And the scripture says the truth shall make you free. I think if we were able to actually have a good relationship with the truth, and then watch this, a secondary conversation that deals with the implications of said truth,
Right.
we can get somewhere. Because let's be honest, and again, and I don't, this is not me being whatever, but let's just be honest. Jesus was whitewashed. There was a narrative. There was and watch this. And I've done enough research to know that wherever Jesus showed up in different cultures, they depicted Jesus to look like them. Right? I've seen pictures of a Oriental Jesus that has slinty eyes and all that other stuff. So I think cultures kind of do that innately. But let's be honest, for us in America, 200, 300, 400 years ago, Jesus was weaponized against people of faith and of color. So before we even got to the shores of North Carolina, West Virginia, the East Coast, some of us had a Christian faith and ethic. It may not be the brand of Christianity that we see in our churches today, but there was a consciousness of Jesus Christ. So if we are honest about those conversations, and then, like I said, have a subsequent conversation about the implications of it psychologically, economically, sociologically, upon people of color in this country, I think then we can begin to have honest, forthright dialogue that actually advances the kingdom of God.
And I think even from that standpoint, that's all we're asking for.
Yeah.
Because if we're all a part of the same faith, to their point, does it matter where it started in the world? It does when you take history, pervert it, change it, alter it. Obviously, it means something to you to take that purity, contaminate it, use it for manipulation. And see, in those things, this is why we can no longer do it. I just can't shut up and preach. Because if you just referenced, is one of my favorite verses, John 8:32. You shall know the truth will make you free. Well, if freedom is the goal, if liberty is the goal, if getting out of bondage is the goal and the objective, and that's what we do, we're hope dealers. Well, in my faith, if I see anything in it that is against that, becomes an impediment to the goal of freedom, I have to attack it. I just can't, well, let's just preach what we agree on. No, this is not a matter of disagreement. This is a matter of truth. It's a matter, that's how serious it is. And maybe, I've said this, I hope I don't offend anyone when I say this, but the majority culture, I've often said this, that they're more brainwashed than people of African descent, because they don't even realize you're being used to purport a lie, to keep classism alive, to keep racism alive, to keep these social classes alive. You're being used. And you don't even know it, because there's even a ceiling for you. because you're not part of that elite class.
Right.
And at some point, as believers, we've got to get together and say, regardless of whatever, like, the gospel starting in the region of Africa and the Middle East is not an indictment on white people.
Say that one more time. Say that one more time.
The fact that the gospel started in Africa and the Middle East is not an indictment on white people. It doesn't make you inferior. Like
At all.
I don't know anyone. There's one thing that I believe. And I remember there's two things that when I first saw Malcolm X, the movie, that the guy in jail told him, it was one thing. He says, you curse because you don't know what else to say. It's a matter of your capacity for vocabulary. The second thing he told him, and this is just, he said, you say that this man is teaching hate. He's not teaching hate. He said, but because of the self-hate and the lies concerning a person's history, there had to come a teaching to counterbalance so that you could get love of self and humanity in general, because you've been taught that you were nothing.
Right.
So I think there's a lack of understanding. There's a lack of understanding. I remember, I won't name the son of the leader. This is the son of this leader here in the United States is huge. If I call his name, there's nobody that doesn't know him, because their movement has done so many things. But one of my friends used to serve at that church, and there were some things that came up during the election, the Trump years, and he had to have a personal conversation with them. And he said, my friends asked him, he says, when you see somebody black, a black male, what do you think? And the son of this just humongous church movement said to him, I wonder if he can play basketball.
Wow.
Now, his dad doesn't showcase any of those things. He was a Trump supporter. I don't really care. It ain't that big. I'm not going to judge you over that. You like who you like, whatever. But that was an alarming statement. It was an alarming statement. Of course, it got back to his dad. They had to start dealing with that stuff. But there are these general assumptions that people have about Black people that have never been tested in the reality of life. For instance, your brain is bigger than mine. Who told you that? Where do you get that from? A brain's a brain. It's a brain. A lot of it depends on what's poured onto it. The Latins call it tabula rasa, clean slate. Whatever happens in those first 7 to 8 years can determine who you're going to be.
Yeah.
So we just need really, if humanity, if culture, if the world is going to move on, here's a couple things. I'll end it here. Here's a couple things I think need to happen. Number one, preachers are going to have to get bold. You're going to have to be willing to risk your reputation, your brand, whatever you call it, to speak truth to the powers that be, because somebody will hear it. Maybe it won't happen in your generation, but maybe it'll happen in the next. Maybe your boldness will give someone else the boldness to take that torch that you lit, but we're not able to carry. We need to do that.
I think this is going to have to be maybe a part two, to be honest with you. I think it's such an important conversation. I think this is probably the freest we've spoken, maybe on Reformation TV. But like I said, society is so nuanced, and it's really a matter of being able to have a high level conversation that is contextualized with both and. Mm-hmm. It can't be it's this or that or nothing. It has to be both and. And when you involve people are varied. Like even within, every race of people, or should I say ethnicity of people, has nuance even within themselves.
True.
Not all Black people are the same. Not all white people are the same. Not all Mexican people are the same. you have Republicans out of African Americans. You have Democrats that are African American. You have,
Absolutely.
I mean, no one is a monolith. And so when we talk about these issues, it's got to be with a scalpel and not a sword. It's got to be with precision and not just with an axe, not just with a sword. It's got to be with an X-Acto knife, because there are nuances and there are things that are complex. And then, like I said, and I think this is the part where we oftentimes fall apart, is we don't have the capacity, or seemingly don't have the capacity, to talk about the implications of the truth that we discover. It's like, we can agree on this. Yes, we agree. Okay, Africa is the motherland. Okay, so let's ebb that out.
Yeah.
We can agree on this. These were people of color, right? Okay, we agree on that. We see this. Your scholars say this, my scholars, and we got this. We agree here. Da, 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 da. So let's look at the implications of that through the history. Yeah.
I
So
would
we can't just shut up and preach.
I would encourage people. I think it's one of the greatest series of the 21st century. I honestly believe that with all my heart. Race, religion, and racism.
Dr. Fred Price.
You just, because a lot of what we're saying, he dug it up, and it reminds you how, even though it seems to be diminished, it reminds you of how important the voice of the church is and was. There were things I was like, wow, that was in a Bible commentary in the side notes. That, like, there were certain, I'm like, they published that? Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. So again, this is Reformation TV, where we are developing we're developing intelligent Christianity, making you think, rubbing you a little bit, sometimes in a way. If you'll just do this for us, folks, we appreciate you. If you'll take your time really quickly, and you will subscribe to our channel here, and then make sure you hit the notification button as well. We appreciate that. If you also would be so kind, if you have questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, criticisms, prophecies, and or appeals, you can email us at rtvintelligentchristianity@gmail.com. As he said, there will be a part 2 to this next week. Any last thoughts at all, Dr. BT3?
No, sir.
All right. Until then, we will see you next week. Have an incredible week, and we'll talk with you next time.